Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents. My name is David. I am the Malcontent. And today is Thursday, May 27th, 2021. I hope everybody is doing as well as I am tonight. Actually, I hope you're doing a little better than that. Jennifer, I'm feeling pretty weird about tonight's show.
Yeah, me too. It's been kind of like rush, pull it together. And I haven't even washed my hair and I have on mascara and that's it. So let's do it. Let's do it.
Malcontents, there are 20 minutes of video clips tonight that nobody has reviewed after they went out of post. So anything could happen.
Yep. It's one of those nights.
The other thing is, just so everybody knows, this is borderline. This is like new style OG. We have no speaker notes tonight. This is it. I've got one page.
Yeah,
we are. Yep. We're diving into concrete tonight. I'm glad you love the energy, Courtney. We're bringing the energy because it's all we got this evening.
Yeah.
Jennifer, what we'll do, right, because we're not very formal, let's go ahead and do that land acknowledgement.
All right.
And we'll have some talk, and then we will get into the big news of the day.
Okay. Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We are grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot Nation. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working towards repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. I will let you know, this will probably put a smile on your face. I was doing the real job for a chunk of today. I was consulting with a client who's got events they're preparing for. And I told them, because we're adding this into our work streams, that you should at least consider, obviously because I'm dealing with corporate America, I can only push so hard, but you really should consider, if you're doing this in King County and doing a land acknowledgement, because basically everybody is doing that now, and it isn't just about being the cool kids. It's I would call it it's a requirement. And they were like, you know what, you're right. It was like, we got the language, don't worry about that. So I want to let you know, I thought that'd put you a smile on your face.
Hey, good to know. Good job, David. Good job.
Jennifer, there's kind of breaking news coming out of the Washington State Supreme Court. It's something that will impact independent journalists and streamers, and I think it's something that the indie journalist and the streamer community needs to understand. The Washington State Supreme Court has ruled that an individual who runs the YouTube channel Liberty's Champion, it sounds kind of chuddish, but I haven't heard of the channel before, does not qualify as a member of the media under state public records law. Now, of course, this had me go, oh, when I saw this, it's a 7-2 opinion.
Yeah.
We have a pretty liberal court here.
Yeah.
This was what they said. The definition of news media requires an entity, and I have, quote, to have a legal identity separate from the individual. Now, full stop, we operate under an LLC. We're attached to a parent company. The business license has this listed as a separate business attached to that LLC, file as an S Corp. So our asses are watertight in this department. But it isn't necessarily about us. There are a number, certainly in Washington State, there aren't many independent streamers left at this point. But for the people that are out there and who, aren't operating under that separate entity, this could have some legal implications that trickles into other things. And I'm not saying because I'm not a lawyer, Jennifer, but this then gets into, if somebody calls themselves a journalist and say I shouldn't say videotapes, God, gray hair and this, but records less than savory things going on, but then doesn't broadcast that, can the police then subpoena that? And then you do not have protection, at least by Washington State, as a member of the media to go, that's privileged information as a member of the media. I don't have to release this to you.
Yeah, that's tricky. And I think that's going to have to be something that people take really seriously because of the potential implications of that. Yeah, that's really interesting. And we're going to have to keep an eye on that and how that plays out and how the ways in which it's enforced and upon whom.
The other thing then, Jennifer, that also implies, right, if somebody is holding up their press badge and there are people, well, you need an official, there is no entity that you go to and prints an official press badge.
Yeah.
Newsflash to people here. There are a number of organizations you can pay $50, $100 to, and they'll send you a press pass. But frankly, that really, from a legality standpoint, gets you nothing more than one that you printed yourself if you operate as an S Corp or if you operate individually, or if you worked at an affiliate station. The only thing that's going to get you is the further up the food chain you go, it's, the higher you are on that food chain, you're going to get more doors opened up when you flash that pass. So that's the other thing that you have to wonder, will some law enforcement organizations outside of Seattle, because Seattle's operating under very specific rules under the TRO from August 10th, will they look at someone who's claiming to be media and go, no, you're not, and then potentially arrest them for trespass or interference or anything else that they want to make up and confiscate the video that they've been shooting?
Yeah, because then it becomes subjective and who decides who is actual media and who is not, who gets, that power. And I really don't think that the police need any more power to regulate that kind of stuff than they already have, So this is tricky.
It is tricky. And I think the last thing that potentially comes up with this, Jennifer, I doubt anybody that is an insurrectionary anarchist watches us anymore or gives a crap about what we have to say. But if you're operating in block and your view is, well, we'll film in block when the cops are doing shit, and if somebody, right, and they go, will say, well, I'm media. I would say the Supreme Court's ruling, you don't have that card unless, again, you are operating for another separate business entity.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was going to make a snide Katie Davis court comment, but I'm going to leave it alone.
Well, of course, Katie Davis Court works for Turning Point USA, and by all understanding, right, she is probably paid, so her ass is watertight.
I know, but I was still going to make a snide comment about Katie and
Go ahead and make the snide comment. It's okay. We like snide comments on Katie Davis Court.
Person today, David. I'm trying really hard to be a good person today.
We like it when you're not a better person on here. So, Jason, thank you for sharing. I see that on the comments there. See, the comments, they're saying do it.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that.
That wasn't Jason. That's other people are saying do it.
Okay.
And Rashi is laughing. Okay.
Of course she is.
Hey, if you made that comment about watertight asses dirty, that's on you. That's not on me. I'm seeing.
Okay.
All right. Walk it away from this. Jennifer, another thing that I've read in the news, Bill Cosby didn't get parole today.
Good. That's it. I mean, like, good. I mean, why?
You got the koozie, the good pudding pops.
Yeah. The guy's a predator. Why would, like, I mean, an absolute sexual predator. What?
Jennifer, have you seen the news about Rufio Padman today of the Proud Boys?
No.
So Rufio, through his lawyers, wants to get out of jail.
Oh, that's right.
Again.
I did see that.
Because it is psychologically damaging for him to be in jail. Jail is far more awful than what he ever thought it could possibly be. And he's having to hang out with people he doesn't like. Aww. And he's starting to realize I might be in jail for a really long time before my trial even happens. And I went out. And to me, just this whole, Jennifer, I watch stuff on TikTok, right? And it's this, they got the black flag for Civil War, right? Yo ho, whoa, right? And they're ready for Civil War. What, this guy's been in jail, what? Not even 60 days? And it's like, I'm done.
So,
and it's like, what? You can't handle an American jail. What, you really want me to believe that you're going to be able to handle extended Civil War and combat situations? You're out of your flipping minds.
So I know you're old enough to know what this is because we're close in age. What is that?
It's the world's smallest violin. It's the world's smallest violin. It's playing just for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you think like
what was it? What was it? The Chuds?
These are Chuds.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
What was it they were saying last year? Wasn't it something on the lines of like play stupid games and win stupid prizes?
Yes. Yes. Well,
there are logical consequences to try to overthrow the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of them's called jail.
Yep. There's your prize, bud.
I mean, let's remember, these are the same people 13 months ago, who have like the survival bunker and their rifle wife, who were losing their shit 30 days into shutdown because they couldn't get their hair fucking cut.
What's that bomb? This is
rifle wife.
This is written. This is written.
Ah, shit.
And I can't go to the barber. You think the barber's going to be open during Civil War II?
Maybe he can find a good one in jail.
Hallelujah! Holy shit!
On the subject of fucking wah.
What's the F-bomb? This is written. This is written.
Dora, that was just for you. I saw your comments. Jennifer, I've got a video of a entitled white woman.
Yes. This is great.
Who wants to talk to the manager? Let me roll that clip.
He threw me to the ground. My name is Terry Ann Blues. I'm the manager of the fucking airport here.
That's not
Who saw me choking? Who saw him choke me to the ground? Who saw me?
I saw you run through the door when you weren't supposed to. And then I saw him
me
push
to
you
the
out
ground.
the door.
You deserve
I'm pretty sure you're
In a
mistaken.
dress.
Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo.
Boo-hoo. You fuck off.
What's the F-bomb? This is written. This is written.
So apparently she ignored airport and the TSA, opened up the door to the ramp because trucked down the ramp, I don't understand why after 9/11 changed everything, why she would have got tackled.
Yeah.
And she was tackled very nicely compared to like some of the video clips we showed of people getting tackled by police last night in our documentary.
Yeah, no, she was outrageous. I'm curious to know what her name is. Do we know her name?
She says her name at the start of the video, but I can't remember it at the moment. But she gives her full name with her middle name. So
Ooh.
My guess is, Jennifer, she has small children because, you know, because everyone went through this as a kid, right? Mm-hmm. If the parent dropped the middle name on your ass,
you're in trouble.
You were just like, oh man.
That happens to my children. But I will say this, like, God help us that woman reproduced. See, I'm not completely good. I still have some bad in me tonight.
Carla, thank you for the comment on the documentary. We will talk about that in a little bit before we dive into like the big story here. Jennifer, I saw it's in the ticker. I saw a results of a survey today, but I didn't have a chance to download it and go into all the methodology and all. Mm-hmm. It says that about 20% of adult Americans basically believe the QAnon stuff. 20%.
That's one
of which is I know my history because it appears we will not get a January 6th insurrection commission. It's looking awful a lot like 1924 Germany to me.
Yeah, that's so insane to me that we're not going to get a commission. Whatever. You know what? Like, okay. So now we're going to have to live with the consequences of a bunch of these QAnon assholes, which apparently is now 1 in 5 people, which is the same statistics of adults that, okay. Anyways, we now have to deal with 1 in 5 people who believe in the QAnon conspiracy, no commission on the insurrection, which literally tried to overthrow the government and install a fucking dictator, excuse my language.
What's the F-bomb? This is written.
And we're just going to let it go by and nothing's going to happen. Might as well just go write, the American version of Mein Kampf somewhere. Maybe what's his name could do it in prison. It'll probably be in, like acronyms, but still the QAnon people will understand. I don't know, acronyms and emojis. It's going to be the entire book.
QAnon shaman for QAnon shaman for Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, and then it's going to have like intermittent like drawings of different flags. It's going to be acronyms.
This is our flag this week because this is what we're pissed off about.
Acronyms, emojis, and flag drawings.
Okay. I think we have to dive into our first story here.
Okay.
You're always like, is it glitchy? I think you need to get your internet connection checked.
I tried that. Remember?
No, not you. You're fine. I said Pam.
Oh, okay.
Pam. I love Pam. Pam, we love you to death, but there's always comments from you like, my connection's real glitchy. I think you need to check your glitchy connection. Or try watching on we're on 4 sources. Try different. I've always found, we're perfect on Twitter. That's what I find. That should be like people's fallback is like go to the Twitter channel. Jennifer, the last thing I want to say, I've actually gotten tons of praise for our documentary. Can you hear us?
Good.
I've had a couple of people reach out to me going, hey, if you're going to crack it open and do more. And I'll get into that in a second, or if there's any video you want me, and that was part of our hope was to get some people to go, well, wait a minute, I've got a video for this, or, you know, you're telling this part, but my video is better than your video. There's no egos here. We want to tell the story, and we've had people coming forward. Something the team knows, this morning found another hard drive with some really critical video on it. There's actually was one video on that hard drive, Jennifer, where I was looking for it specifically for the documentary. I couldn't find it. And I'm like, I guess it got lost, right? I guess lost in the shuffle, shit happens. And I found it. So there is going to be a director's cut. The other thing I will say, Jennifer, there is, it's up on YouTube. We did the edit on the end card with Steve Herjack, who was demoted. So we've updated that. Okay. There's a couple other little tweaks there. I don't know. Like, if you want to watch it again, then go watch the YouTube version, because meaning the one that's not the stream, but the one that was uploaded, because there's some little changes if you want to watch it a second time. But a director's cut will be, I'm calling it a director's cut, but a director's cut will be coming. And I'm excited that other people want to jump in on the project now.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, you know, because next week we start talking about the Civil War and Reconstruction era in the class I teach, because I teach the 1800s. And so I'm actually sharing that video with my class because I think it's really good. It's a good way to use the present, historicize the present, using in talking about the Civil War and Reconstruction and what people are still fighting for.
That's very cool. Jennifer, are we ready to go to the real story and the big story of the night?
Yes.
So Jennifer, I know you're doing this story. I just want to jump in with this. We talked about it last night. We were pessimistic. There was lots of pessimism being expressed, not just by us, but by everybody. This morning, I was kind of flipping through some of the news channels, and Bob Ferguson said, hey, no press conference. We're doing a press release and a tweet. And even among the affiliate stations, there was this sense of, what? And if you read between the lines, the feeling was kind of, this doesn't feel like charges are coming, because why would they just, we're going to do a press release. We're not going to answer any questions. And
that's interesting. And I know we have a bunch of video, or at least a few videos to go along with this. So why don't you and I just I've got notes. We'll kind of have a conversation. You can interject when you think it's time to show the video, so I don't keep rambling.
Yeah, so why don't we do this? We'll roll the first video clip. Okay. It's from June, but the thing is, when Manny Ellis was murdered, and that's the word we can use now, because I've kind of gotten to the punchline, when Manny Ellis was murdered on March 3rd, this wasn't much of a story, and this didn't become a story until June, and the death of George Floyd and the social justice protests, and people like the Tacoma Action Coalition and Black Panthers of Tacoma really just, what about Manny Ellis?
Yeah.
And this story then blew up, and it blew up on a national stage. And so with that, let me roll this clip, which, although from June, looks backwards to March.
Okay.
In the background of this 911 call, recorded the night Manuel Ellis died in police custody, you can faintly hear someone say, "I can't breathe." The Pierce County medical examiner ruled Ellis's death a homicide. I'm told he died from hypoxia due to physical restraint. They also found methamphetamine in his system and say his heart was enlarged. Tuesday, dozens marched the streets of Tacoma to protest police brutality and racial inequality. Ellis died March 3rd. There's no video of his death. Although autopsies show similarities, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department says Ellis's death is different than George Floyd's.
There was no heads on knees, there was no cutting off of circulation, none of that. He was never being arrested. He contacted the police, and obviously he was in distress. They asked him if he needed help, and he said he had warrants. and that he wanted to talk. So they got out to talk to him because he was obviously in distress. And when they did that, he assaulted one of the officers.
Detective Ed Troyer says that's when officers restrained him.
And a lot of times when we detain people or hobble them, it's so they don't hurt themselves and they don't hurt officers. In this particular case, when he said he couldn't breathe, they rolled him on the side, and he was breathing and he was talking.
But moments later, Ellis stopped breathing. He died shortly after paramedics got there. The 4 Tacoma police officers involved were placed on administrative leave. The investigation will now be handed over to the prosecutor's office.
Oh, Jennifer. I know I'm supposed to play journalist here. I mean, I say it and all, but if Ed Troyer was Pinocchio.
Yeah. Because that's the thing. Troyer's like, oh, this isn't, this doesn't really violate I-940. And they didn't do anything. They didn't put a neck or, a knee across his neck or his back. And then, of course, the video footage comes out because there's 3 videos of it. And then the security footage from a Ring security camera that actually caught it all, plus eyewitness accounts. So basically he looks like a big fat asshole, excuse my language. Because it's we're going back to March, and basically Ellis was murdered. He's jumped in the streets. There's no 911 call. His final words are, "I can't breathe, sir." It's just I don't know. And then there's the lies. They lied in the reports, and it finally comes to light after all of the video footage surfaces. And then you have the medical examiner, the Pierce County medical examiner, of course, is like, hey, this is a homicide because he died from hypoxia and physical restraint, which is ironically the same cause of death of George Floyd. And then, of course, there was he had heart disease too, and he had methamphetamine in his system. But still, the Pierce County medical examiner ruled this a homicide for a very specific reason, and it was due to the restraint. So today we had Christopher Burbank and Matthew Collins, who were charged with second-degree murder, and Timothy Ranking was actually charged with first-degree murder. And if you remember correctly, there were 4 that were immediately put on paid leave right after his death. And then there was a 5th one that was added to the list shortly thereafter. But this investigation...
That was on Ranky, that's first-degree manslaughter, not first-degree murder. First-degree manslaughter.
Okay, so we have 2 with second-degree murder, 1 with first-degree manslaughter. And this has been an ongoing 14-month investigation, and it was such a mess that Inslee finally had to take it over, get the Washington State Patrol involved, and they produced this massive report, 2,000 plus pages, right? And then
yes. And according to James Bible today, who is the attorney for Ellis's survivors at Ellis's family, what he said in that press conference today is that Jay Inslee and the governor's office had no interest in taking up this investigation, that this has been spin on the part of the governor's office, that when they went, they were in an argument they said they went up at 7:30 in the morning and waited. They got in an argument with the chief of staff for Governor Inslee. The chief of staff was, these aren't the facts in the case. Basically, what they were articulating, some of the stuff we were talking about. Yeah. They're like, we have receipts. That's not the words that James Bible used, but we have receipts. They went and looked at that, and then that was the point when Governor Inslee was like, okay, I'm going to sit down with you. Jennifer, there was something that came up in the comments that I think is really important for people to understand. The only reason this criminal investigation happened in the first place is because people were marching in the streets in Tacoma.
Yep. No, I agree. And it's again, it's been a 14-month investigation. They were supposed to release the results or the findings in March. And then there was this concern about some kind of internal conflict or potential conflict of interest within the Washington State Patrol that prolonged the release of the findings. So his family has been sitting for 14 months waiting for some kind of determination and charges. And so, that's what we have today is the 2 charged with second-degree murder and then first-degree manslaughter.
So initially Pierce County was investigating this under I-940 because I-940 says that you can't have essentially the police investigating the police. Interestingly, I-940 also says you're not supposed to, like, if we look at Tacoma can't go to Federal Way and say, hey, can you investigate this, right? Because they're next door. But interesting, we go to the Pierce County Sheriff, that's okay. Ed Troyer wasn't sheriff at the time. Ed Troyer was a detective and generally was considered the spokesperson for Pierce County Sheriff at the time. And 1 week before they were going to release their investigation, it leaked out. Oh, by the way, there was an off-duty Pierce County Sheriff's deputy that was there, and he was part of the dog pile on top of Manny Ellis. And oh, by the way, he was the person that actually hobbled Manny Ellis, put the manacles on his ankles. And Ed Troyer's defense of his department was, well, we don't think that really violated I-940.
Yes. Yeah. Of course not. And I think one of the grossest things that's come out of this is the statement by, was it the Tacoma Police Union, who's like fervently defending their officers. Of course, I mean, it's not unexpected. I did not expect them to be this way because it's a police union. But like this statement is just so grotesque. And I know we have pieces of it in the article that's on the websites. So I hope everybody goes and takes a look at that because it has a lot more information than what we've shared with you this evening. But yeah, they really kind of came out with a gross, unsurprising, but gross defense of the police officers who are charged with the murder of Ellis.
They took a page from Donald Trump. It's a witch hunt.
Yes. Yes.
One of the things that James Bible said today, I'm going to paraphrase. The exact quote is up on our Twitter channel. If you go on the Twitter channel, we were live streaming and live tweeting some of the things going on in that conference today. So I'm going to paraphrase it. This isn't a witch hunt. This was a 14-month investigation. Nobody held, and then I put in brackets you because he didn't use the word you. Nobody held you down and beat you with a rock and demanded that you tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful words.
And by the way, I was very impressed that he knows his Salem, Massachusetts history.
Yes. Yes.
I like you even more. Jennifer, let me roll this next clip.
Okay.
We're going to do a content warning on this clip because this clip shows we don't have any videos. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a minute. There is videos. 3 videos. We're going to roll it, but this one gets a content warning.
Okay.
A violent arrest witnessed 3 months ago in Tacoma, Washington.
Oh my God, that looks so scary.
Sarah McDowell released her video publicly this week.
They're yelling at him to put his hands behind his back, but I can see the cop, they're like on top of him. Both of them are on top of him.
Hours later, the man on the ground would be pronounced dead, 33-year-old Manuel Ellis. The officers called for medical assistance. In the background, Ellis can be heard. I can't breathe, he says, at least twice. On Wednesday, the medical examiner ruled his death a homicide. The cause, respiratory arrest due to physical restraint. Methamphetamines and a heart condition were listed as contributing factors. Tacoma's mayor lashing out.
And the officers who committed this crime should be fired and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
The police union fired back. This is not the time to sacrifice dedicated public servants at the altar of public sentiment, especially when that sentiment is almost wholly fueled by the uninformed anger of a theatrical politician. A spokesperson for the Tacoma police says Ellis assaulted an officer that night.
Mr. Ellis grabbed one of the police officers and threw him on the ground.
But to the family and many others in this community, there are striking parallels to George Floyd's death.
I would say as soon as I heard the audio footage, my brother screaming, "I can't breathe." I knew something wasn't right.
They are left wondering why it took a video to get officials to act.
We want to see justice for my son, and we should have had to wait 3 months.
Tonight, the 4 officers involved are on administrative leave, while Ellis's death is being investigated, and the family is still waiting.
Remember, that video's from June of 2020, so the call for the firing, the call for prosecution to the fullest extent of law. And Jennifer, it was like the Tacoma Police Union just took their statement from June and lightly edited it and threw it back up. There's some of the exact same sentences in their press release today, which I didn't even notice until we ran this clip.
Yeah, real creative bunch over there. Put in a lot of effort to putting out a statement to defend your police officers when you're recycling the one from, however many months ago, almost a year ago. Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is that Ellis's family said that he'd had some mental health issues in the past. And I think that just underscores again the need for, de-escalation, for mental health professionals to be available to respond to certain calls rather than the police. And for there to be more available resources to help people that are consistently dealing with mental health issues that don't cost you, that don't make you decide whether, do I need to treat my mental health illness and take my medication and see a therapist, or do I need to pay my power bill? Because it's not cheap. It is not cheap if you don't have good insurance. And even if you have state insurance, getting in to get services sometimes takes months. So we really have got to come together and do something in this state and even nationally to provide better mental health resources for people who are struggling, because it is it's an epidemic. Mental health issues are an epidemic, and so much of it is going untreated. And we continue to see issues where people who are in the throes of mental health crises are getting essentially murdered because there's nobody there to de-escalate the situation and to help them, and they don't have access to care. So that's my rant on that.
Sarah McDowell, who filmed one of the 3 videos and was in that interview and was the first person to come forward with the video. First of all, Ms. McDowell, thank you for your bravery and coming forward with that. Also, thank you for not deleting it or forgetting about it. She is definitely a contributor to where we are today. What she had said in an article I had read is she decided to film because she saw Ellis walk up to the police and thought it was just a friendly chat at the traffic light. And she says, all of a sudden, because what did Tacoma police? Well, he assaulted us. What she said was the officer just threw his door open and knocked him to the ground. And then just basically jumped out and piled on top of him. Manny Ellis had schizophrenia. And I put something up on Twitter, right? We're not going to say he's schizophrenic because mental illness does not define a person. You don't say that person is a cancer. You would, and I don't mean the astrological sense, and I don't mean in the sense that they're a terrible individual. You would say that person has cancer. And we have to destigmatize mental illness in this country. And when you say, oh, they're schizophrenic, you're labeling that individual. Manny Ellis was a human being. He had a disease. It was called schizophrenia. And by all reports from his caseworkers, from the landlords at the house that he was at, he was progressing on the treatment that he got. Now, one thing that's different here, Jennifer, this wasn't the case of a 911 call, but this was still an individual clearly in a mental health crisis. And he was murdered, and we can use that word. He was murdered for essentially having a mental health crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, I'm not going to shut up about it. We need more mental health resources, and we need ways in which to de-escalate it where we're not sending police out to deal with people that they aren't equipped to deal with. and they end up
By
dead.
the way, if you live in the city of Tacoma, remember this. Those 3 officers that were charged today have been on a 6-digit paid vacation. While they had been waiting for this, they were suspended in June. They've been on a 1-year, 6-digit paid vacation. And one of the things that James Bible, and I'll close on this, Jennifer, that James Bible talked about is that they know that these officers have traveled, they gone on trips, and they've done stuff while all this has been hanging over their head. So they've had to get to live their life. Manny Ellis is dead.
That's so disgusting to me. Like, you get to travel and live your life and do all these things after you murder a man, and his family has to sit and wait for 14 months for someone to decide if they're going to charge you with that murder, even though it's on video. That is so disgusting to me. Like, okay, can we just stop now?
Hallelujah! Holy shit! Where's the Tylenol?
Yeah, we'll do a pause for the cause, Jennifer. We will go on to our next segment.
Okay.
If you enjoyed Can You Hear Us, you know we got the mojo and you know we can deliver the goods. Another thing I haven't done yet on the show yet, go ahead and spam those hearts. Please spam those hearts. Come on, there's the heart button. I think I have to put new batteries in this. Go ahead and spam those hearts. Let those mods, admins, researchers, writers, editors, Jennifer and I know that you love us, just not in a non-creepy way. I saw a hysterical comment yesterday from one of our viewers that said, I love all of you in a totally creepy way.
Well, as long as it's all of us. I mean, like.
Yes, exactly. That made it okay. The other thing I want to say, if you haven't, I should have said this at the beginning, if you haven't liked, follow, share, for the love of God, like, follow, share. It's the easiest thing you can do, and it helps us grow, and it supports independent journalism. Namibia is a documentary. Actually, it has been in the can for a while now, and it was going to show the differences of the extreme gap between the haves and the have-nots. It is a beautiful country. There are some things that you will see that will amaze you with the beauty, and there are some things that you're going to see that are just going to shock you to the level of poverty that people live. I think there's one clip in there, Jennifer, that is meant to be in there to shock. And I can say that's not the most shocking thing that people will see when we get that out. Right now, production on that's been paused because we've been working on Can You Hear Us? I think we're going to work on that director's cut for Can You Hear Us? And then we'll move on to Namibia. Remember, fall technically goes to December 20th.
A Christmas documentary.
It could be a Christmas gift. All right, Jennifer, let me cue up our next story. So we interviewed, I should say, Renee on our team interviewed Lori Jenkins at the end of the legislative session where our state political critters actually got a lot done, certainly compared to other states.
Yeah, they did, actually. And I know there's some interesting tidbits in this interview that we talked a little bit about before we came on air. And so I'm excited to see what people have to say about it.
Yes, and I alluded at the front, at the top of the hour, Jennifer, that there's about 20 minutes of content where it hasn't been reviewed. It went through post, and it was just push it onto the server, push it up.
Yeah,
and this is why I said it's like I got a weird feeling about tonight. So.
Yeah.
And with that, we're not playing all 20 minutes. It's 2 10-minute segments. We'll break. We'll put a little pause for the cause and the break, and then we will do the second half. Jennifer, with that, let me roll the first clip.
So first of all, I want to thank you so much, Lori, for joining us on tonight's show. But first, I want to check in with your family. How's everything going there in Tacoma? And most importantly, have everyone been vaccinated?
Yeah. Our 20, almost 21-year-old son has been living with us. He's going to college from here at home. And so all three of us got vaccinated together both times. And today he's going to school from home. I'm working from home, and my wife is working also from home. So she's in the dining room table. I had to go down to the basement this morning to do some of my work because our son was taking his theater class from the usual space that I'm in. So it can be a little bit difficult with all three of us trying to get things done in a relatively small house, but we're doing great. It's been wonderful to be able to spend this much time with our son. So thank you for asking, and I hope you're vaccinated and doing well too.
Yes. So the legislature was the most diverse it's ever been. Obviously, you welcome new members of color, women, and LGBT people. And so how did the legislature achieve this success? Is it sustainable? And what can be done to encourage its continued diversity among the lawmakers?
Diversity, having a diverse group of members is important in and of itself because it inspires other people to want to run. You know, obviously, like when I ran and was the first out lesbian elected to the legislature, the number of people who emailed me, I wasn't expecting this, but the number of people who emailed me in the queer community about it inspiring them to run was really heartening. Same thing when I was elected speaker as the first woman and the first, lesbian speaker. That's important because it inspires other people. But the other thing that it did for us, lots of people have been lauding this last session as the most productive session in more than a generation of Washingtonians, just incredibly productive. And that's because we had diverse representation in our caucus. It meant that we were bringing many more diverse voices to the table. And one of the things I always find interesting is that can make it harder to get to a resolution on how we're going to handle something because there's more diversity, but the solution is always better. It always represents more people and the experiences of more people. So it's worth it to have to do that work at the table where there's very divergent opinions because our solution is better. So I'm excited. We have the most diverse leadership team that we've ever had, the most diverse caucus, and the best session that we've had in, more than a generation.
For too long, transgender individuals such as myself have had a hard time getting access to gender-affirming treatments. Obviously, often their insurance denies them coverage for these services. So how will the passage of Senate Bill 5313 change that?
That was probably our one of our biggest victories for the LGBTQ community this year, and especially our trans community. We've done work over the past kind of 4 or 5 years with the insurance commissioner, issuing rulings talking about discriminatory treatment by insurance companies and telling insurance companies that they need to be non-discriminatory. But what we continue to see, either because of a lack of understanding or also probably because of wanting to just save money, so much of the treatment that our trans brothers and sisters need is denied in the insurance side of the house. And so what's great is that this bill applies not just to people who have private insurance through their employer or who buy it on the exchange, but folks who are Medicaid recipients. Some of our poorest transgender people in Washington state, our Medicaid program will also cover gender affirming care. Really what people have to do is make sure that they're seeing a healthcare provider who will say, this is a medically necessary treatment for this person. And if that's what their provider says, then their insurer is supposed to provide it to them. So I think now what we'll be watching is to make sure that insurers do provide it, that they don't slow roll it, and things like that. So members will be paying special attention to that. And that's where we really do a lot of constituent work, because that's not really about writing a new law if people are getting slow rolled or things like that. That's about members contacting the insurance commissioner's office. It's about members contacting insurers and saying, hey, this isn't okay. You're not following the law. I shouldn't project. Hopefully it'll all be fine and no one will have any trouble. I hope it's one of the big final steps in terms of transformation of for healthcare for our trans community.
Now, it's been a year since the death of George Floyd and the thousands who rose up and called for police accountability. I myself was subjected to pepper spray, flashbangs, blast balls at the hands of Seattle police. How did the legislature address these concerns?
We had a great team in the House, and the Senate also had some great bills, but we passed I think almost a dozen bills on police accountability. And what we were really guided by when we were doing that is trying to both support members of law enforcement.
In the background of this.
So first of all, I want to thank you so much, Lair, for joining us on tonight's show. But first, I want to check in with your family. How's everything going there in Tacoma? And most importantly, have everyone been vaccinated?
Yeah. Our 20, almost 21-year-old son has been living with us. He's going to college from here at home. And so all three of us got vaccinated together both times. And today he's going to school from home. I'm working from home, and my wife is working also from home. So she's in the dining room table. I had to go down to the basement this morning to do some of my work because our son was taking his theater class from the usual space that I'm in. So it can be a little bit difficult with all three of us trying to get things done in a relatively small house. Rulings talking about discriminatory treatment by insurance companies and telling insurance companies that they need to be non-discriminatory. But what we continue to see, either because of a lack of understanding or also probably because of wanting to just save money, so much of the treatment that our trans brothers and sisters need is denied in the insurance side of the house. And so what's great is that this bill applies not just to people who have private insurance through their employer or who buy it on the exchange, but folks who are Medicaid recipients. Some of our poorest transgender people in Washington state, our Medicaid program will also cover gender affirming care. Really what people have to do is make sure that they're seeing a healthcare provider who will say, this is a medically necessary treatment for this person. And if that's what their provider says, then their insurer is supposed to provide it to them. So I think now what we'll be watching is to make sure that insurers do provide it, that they don't slow roll it, and things like that. So members will be paying special attention to that. And that's where we really do a lot of constituent work, because that's not really about writing a new law if people are getting slow rolled or things like that. That's about members contacting the insurance commissioner's office. It's about members contacting insurers and saying, hey, this isn't okay. You're not following the law. I shouldn't project. Hopefully it'll all be fine and no one will have any trouble. I hope it's one of the big final steps in terms of transformation of for healthcare for our trans community.
Now, it's been a year since the death of George Floyd and the thousands who rose up and called for police accountability. I myself was subjected to pepper spray, flashbangs, blast balls at the hands of Seattle police. How did the legislature address these concerns?
We had a great team in the House, and the Senate also had some great bills, but we passed I think almost a dozen bills on police accountability. And what we were really guided by when we were doing that is trying to both support members of law enforcement who are good actors and trying to do the right thing. What we've seen over time is that the relationship between our law enforcement community and the broader community has broken down, and there is a real lack of trust, and that's in part due to a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. So we really wanted to make sure that we were starting to rebuild the relationship between our law enforcement community and our larger community. So what you see are, and I won't remember all 12 of the bills, but you see bills that really limit and contain the tactics that law enforcement officers can use in terms of chokeholds and use of tear gas and all sorts of other more militaristic kind of tools that law enforcement has had access to, that they either won't have access to anymore, or they will be severely limited. And one of the things we also wanted to make sure that we did to not prohibit the use of some tools, and that what would happen in the end was firearms would be used more frequently, right? So you don't want to have these unintended consequences. And our team was very lucky in the House because we worked a lot with the families of individuals who'd been killed in police custody. And we really followed the lead of those families. And then we had an incredible team led primarily by Jesse Johnson from the 30th District, who really did an incredible job of working with everybody to kind of try and find the right paths forward. But, you know, Deborah Entenman also had a tremendous bill to do independent investigations of people when we have someone like, you know, for me in Tacoma, like Manny Ellis, who's killed in police custody. And now the investigation of that will be actually independent of the law enforcement, you know, body that where the person was killed. So that was a second bill. We have a bill from Jamie Peterson, the 43rd, which is essentially about how you de-license, basically decertify a police officer. I spent a bunch of my career licensing healthcare providers, and by gosh, if we can take away a healthcare provider's license, we ought to be able to also take away the license of a police officer if they're not behaving appropriately. And then we had a number of bills on auditing. Monica Dingra had a really good bill that is a duty to intervene when a law enforcement officer sees something that's contrary to policy or law. They're required to intervene. So I'm proud of the work we did, Renee, this year in this area. This is the first year we've really done much of this at all. Mm-hmm. We did do Initiative 940. We're by no means done at all. This is the beginning of a transformation, I think, and I hope. And I think we've really waded in a very big way. But I wouldn't want to say that this is a one and done year at all. It's just a start.
Next. Ha-ha! Coming up next will be the second half of this interview after a little pause for the cause.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington. You take I-5, you get off at exit 176, which is the 175th Avenue exit. I know that can be a little confusing. You head southbound on 99, just a couple of blocks, and it is on the west side of the highway. They have amazing coffee. They have merch. I love my merch. And as I always like to point out, it's the kind that the straw doesn't pop out of. Love those kind of cups. And they have potato scones. If you haven't had a potato scone before, it's like this light, fluffy, great scone. It's not like a ball of lead scone. And a baked potato with cheese and onion got together. They hooked up, and you're eating its offspring. It is just amazing. And that's why I look so good at 75.
Can you please stop talking about how we eat offspring? People are going to be on to our fountain of youth shit.
I have a live view in the inside of my brain. That is also the inside of Jenny Durkin's cell phone.
Yes, yes. It definitely is.
We need to make a little bump, something with Jenny Durkin's cell phone.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Find some of the old Will It Blend videos off of YouTube.
Oh, God.
Hello, IT department? Will it blend? All right, totally have segued. Let's go ahead. Jennifer, we'll hold the unpack because, yeah, I hit the potato scone button too soon. So, I'm hungry. What can I say?
Hallelujah! Holy shit!
All right, let's roll the second half of the clip and then we can do the unpack.
So Washington has the third highest number of reported hate crimes in the nation. Yet HB 1071, which would have tweaked Washington state's hate crime statutes to give hate crimes a designation of crimes against persons, didn't pass this year. What is the benefit of making this change, and will you push for it during the next legislative session?
Part of the feedback that we got on this bill was that maybe, I think we're, at least in my caucus, there's a real sensitivity to the creation of criminal statutes and who those criminal statutes have been applied against. And so I think one of the things that happened with the hate crimes bill this year is people wanted some more time to think about that and think about there. I mean, there's no question that folks want to do better enforcement and better prevention around hate crimes, but we also don't want to have unintended consequences like we've seen in the criminal justice system, where there's huge disproportionality in terms of who's arrested and who's charged with crimes. And I should just note that they're not all unintentional consequences. Some of them are very intentional in terms of the way that the law is set up. So I think Rep. Valdez, he was the prime sponsor of the bill. I think he's going to be working on the bill over the interim and working with community and folks directly impacted to make sure that there's confidence that that the bill is getting at the right perpetrators and is not going to be used to create disproportionate impact as so many of our criminal laws have been. So I think that's the rub. There's really no question, Renee, about whether or not we should prohibit hate crimes and do a lot more work around that. Is when we see this, we've seen this particularly in the Asian community, the Asian American community, the number of hate crimes, really, I think, driven a lot by our former president. And the language that's been used by leadership in the other Washington has been very, very harmful. We want to make sure that we can do even more about that if we can.
Now, as you know, we're facing a housing crisis, not only because of COVID-19, but gentrification and rising housing costs. What is being done to provide relief to those individuals who are facing this crisis?
Yeah, so we invested $1 billion. $1 billion really related to the eviction moratorium, right? So there are a lot of people who've been without work for a long time who have not been paying their rent because they have no money to do that. And once the eviction moratorium is no longer, all of those folks are at risk, would be at risk of being evicted. Right. So we've invested $1 billion in terms of funds to provide renters and their landlords. I mean, one of the other challenges we have is we have a lot of small mom and pop landlords who also have not been getting any income over this time because of the moratorium, and they're on a foreclosure cliff. So some of this money is to prevent is to do foreclosure help, but a lot of it is to pay back rents from renters who haven't been able to pay, so that the renters aren't going to be evicted for failure to pay rent because the money that the state has invested. We also, I was just on a fundraiser this morning for the Pierce County Dialogue and Resolution Center, our dispute resolution center, and we've gotten more funding to our dispute resolution centers statewide because they are very helpful when an eviction starts to happen to get the landlord and the tenant together, and they're very helpful in helping tenants be able to stay in their rental property, or to negotiate with the landlord about how the tenant leaves and when the tenant leaves. And so they're going to be getting funding to help with that. And then we have we have other kind of homeless prevention dollars, and a lot of what we're doing around homelessness is both providing some funding through our capital budget so that local jurisdictions or housing authorities can, for example, buy hotels that are closed now and transition them into housing units. But what we also know is a lot of people who are moving from homelessness into a housed situation also need some supportive services wrapped around them in order to be successful. So one of the big things that we've really started investing in state government is not just the physical buildings or money for physical buildings, but it's operating money for ongoing support so that people have the wraparound services they need to stay stabilized in housing.
I wanted to ask you, what were maybe two of your biggest personal successes, and maybe one thing that you just wish had passed?
We had 4 priority areas in the House, amongst the House Democrats. One was COVID response. The second was building on economic recovery. The third was racial equity. And the fourth was addressing the existential threat of climate change. So we knew that those were the 4 areas we really wanted to work in. 2 things that we haven't talked about that I'll mention are our public health system has been underfunded for decades. I mean, underfunded in huge, huge ways. And the pandemic showed us how much we need a public health system that actually works, and what can happen if you have a local public health system that doesn't have the funding to work. And so we this year invested in an ongoing way $150 million per year in our local health jurisdictions to really build the best working public health system that we can. public health works in all those realms. So I'm excited about that. And then the second big thing is we got through the session with not a single member of our staff, nor a single member of the legislature, nor a single member of the public getting ill with COVID as a result of legislative work. Now, to the south in Oregon and to our east in Idaho, both of those legislatures had to close down because of outbreaks. We were able to work through and to have everyone be safe. And that is in large part due to our commitment to public health. But, I thought a little bit about the fact that there was a new Speaker of the House elected in New Hampshire, and he had a big outdoor public election and kind of party. And 2 weeks later, he was dead. It wasn't just that we were able to have no one get COVID, but we were perhaps more transparent than we've ever been. Members of the public could sit in their homes and testify on bills, which has never happened before. So our public engagement was different than it's been historically, but I think there's a lot, we could definitely argue that it was more accessible to people than it had ever been. I haven't thought much about bills that we did a lot. We passed a lot this year. I think, the police, not every one of our police accountability bills got through. And I think I really want us to think about that for next year. I also think that our work related to criminal justice reform, we need to work more and strengthen our transformation there. The third thing is, even though I can argue that we were more transparent this session than ever before in history, I can't wait for next session and to be back in person with people and be able to meet with members and members of the public in person. And I expect that we'll be able to do that next session. So those are all things I'm looking forward to.
Thank you so much, Lori, for your time. I really appreciate it. I know our viewers appreciate it. And we all wish you continued success.
Thank you, Renee, and it's always great to see you and be a part of your casts and your interview.
And there you go. The editing worked out. I was just really worried there was just going to be some random clip all of a sudden where it would just go off the rails. I'm so happy.
No, it was good. And Renee, you look amazing. I know you're watching because I see you in the comments, but you looked amazing in that interview. So I just wanted you to know that.
Completely agree. There is a blooper with Renee, but I'm not, obviously it's on the cutting room floor. We'll just put it out as the tease and say it's an inside joke among the Malcontentment team. But there is something that happened during that interview and it's hysterical, but we're not going to share it. But it is absolutely hysterical blooper.
I heard about it. I did not get to see it.
Yes. That's as far as we're going to go. I started off saying we got a lot accomplished politically down in Olympia this year. There's actually about another 30 minutes of interview, Jennifer, but obviously we can't show a 50-minute piece. So the parts that we highlighted were the parts that are core to our mission: LGBTQIA, BIPOC police, right? BIPOC police reform, childcare, public health care, stuff that's near and dear to our hearts as an organization. And then there was that question at the end, what did you hope you could have got accomplished, but you didn't get accomplished? Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was it's a good interview. I think any interview Renee does is always a great interview because she's such a consummate professional. But I thought it was a good interview. I enjoyed at the very beginning when she's talking about the struggles of having to be at home and work around their son being in school, because I'm a parent and I felt that. But I'm a single parent, so I'm not having to negotiate another adult in the house. Thank God. No offense to happily married people everywhere. But I thought there was some good points made too about, thinking about how to provide access for transition for trans people on Medicare. I thought that was a particularly a good moment in the interview because, we've talked about, I was just mentioning about mental health care, if you're on Medicare or Medicaid state care, it's often a really long time to get approval and a wait time to get access to certain things. And so making that more accessible, I think, is a really good thing.
Yeah, the talk about all of the police reform bills, which we're familiar with, that have come out, that was good. One of the things, like, I'm like in the half sneeze mode right now, like right on the edge. I'm gonna see if I can power through it. I might have to hit the sneeze button. And there literally is a sneeze button. People in broadcast know exactly what I'm talking about. One of the things that was passed that would have changed the outcome for Manny Ellis, but was not law then, is police officers now by Washington state law are going to be required to intervene if they see malfeasance going on by another police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great, required to intervene. But who the hell is going to enforce that?
Well, that's the whole, it's okay because I-940 and you can't investigate yourself, but it's okay. Tacoma, we're going to call Pierce County to do it. And what city was the seat of for Pierce County again?
Oh, David. I think, we go back to things being performative. And I feel like so much of the legislation that has passed, especially in the context of police reform, is so performative that how do you enforce any of it? And what is it actually that they're looking to change? And is it possible for those reforms to actually implement any kind of meaningful change when you have so much corruption within the police department? They're basically akin to tenured professors at a research university in their ability to be fired and held accountable for shit. So what do? It just looks as though, we're doing this feel-good shit and we feel good and we're going to pat ourselves on the back because we did this reform stuff. But what happens when you go to enforce it? Who's going to police the fucking police?
It's a real, who watches the watchers is a great question. And look what happens in Tacoma, right? You have a mayor that in June of 2020 is like, these officers should be fired.
Yeah.
And the mayor has no power to do anything. Now, full stop, you open up another potential can of worms if you give mayors a blanket authority to fire people, because if the mayor is corrupt, then the mayor could just, police officers knocking on their door, you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an issue in itself. So I think there's some complexity to that. But one of the things that Attorney James Bible talked about today is the power of police unions, and that because of the power of police unions and the way things have been set up, and that the city leaders in Tacoma and Seattle and across the country have negotiated these contracts, they had negotiated away their oversight. And in some, we see this in Seattle and how ineffective the OPA and the IG is. The process is practically pointless there because the police union holds all the power. I mean, Jennifer, let's talk about what we learned about what happened with my case and then the little bit of information that I got added on that. So my case, which I didn't file, my understanding is literally hundreds or thousands of people filed on behalf of what happened. I did not file because I was like, there's no point. Nothing's going to happen. And then that case disappeared. Mm-hmm. You reached out because it would be a conflict of interest for me to reach out. It took a week. And the response we got is, well, we decided that's not about protest. The other thing they never answered was the whole thing on when the officer is identified, and the officer in my case is, not only not identified, he went on TV in the same interview that I gave and talked about it. It's his Twitter feed. There's no question on who the officer was involved. And they're supposed to, when the officer's identified, resolve an OPA case in 180 days. But Jennifer, there's an exception to that. And the exception is if one individual says, we want a waiver on that 180 days thing and we need to take more time. Guess who that person is, that one person?
Who?
Yes.
I don't want to, David. I just don't want to because I.
You know who it is. Just say it.
Is it Mike Solon?
It is Mike Solon, the union president. The union president, who happens to be Mike Solon, can go, we need more time on this.
Yeah, of course he can. So he can defer. I'm sorry, and I know we're supposed to be objective, but I find him actually like repulsive. The thought of him makes my stomach turn a little bit because he has far more power than he should ever be able to wield. And he is not in any way equipped to handle it.
Huh. Well, I don't nearly have the time to unpack this.
And I agree with that assessment. It's an example that I use to your point about until these bad contracts are broken down, there isn't going to be any real reform. And, there's this crosscut story that we alluded to a little bit, which is, in Seattle, this is probably as good as it's going to get. And it's like, well, that's not good enough. So if that's as good as it's going to get, I've said I'm not an abolitionist, full stop. I don't think, I think the current system works perfectly in that it is working as designed. And that system has to be torn down past the foundation. Some people define that as being an abolitionist. Some people don't. I don't, because I don't think it's palatable for people to say that. But it is beyond extreme reform, right? I'm not looking at this house and going, we can rehab this house. I'm looking at this house and going, this 16,000 square foot lot, this is a frickin' tear down. We're not even using the same foundation. We're plowing it all out, and we're starting with something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you have to tear shit down, dismantle it, and then rebuild it in a different way in order for it to function in an equitable and fair way. Because the current system, you're right, it works perfect because our nation was founded on white supremacy and, to protect white people at all costs, and particularly white men in positions of power. And that is what it is doing. So that
something that came out in the investigative report with Manny Ellis, Jennifer, is Tacoma police officers were sending celebratory texts to each other as all of this was kind of breaking on March 3rd, potentially before Manny Ellis's body was even cold.
Ah, that's so fucking gross. I hope I hope the 3 people that got charged get the maximum amount of time and they get to sit and rot in jail and relive this shit for the next 10, 20 years, because that's what they deserve.
We've been following this story for a year, Jennifer. I mean, you've been on the show 7 months now, and like once a month, I'm like, Manny Ellis, when are we going to find out? How come people aren't chanting his name? How come people aren't marching in the streets? When are we going to hear anything? The other thing I will say, let's not forget, we're still nowhere near towards justice on this. Another accusation that came from James Bible today, that the family was briefed the day before the announcement. We know from working with Jesse Saray's family, they got the same treatment. They were briefed the day before. The Washington State Patrol, James Bible, their attorney, is alleging that the Washington State Patrol tipped off the 3 officers that they would be criminally charged tomorrow, meaning today. But hey, it's an impartial system.
It's
an impartial system.
Excuse my language. Those assholes, excuse my language, will protect the shit out of each other, but will protect the people that they're fucking paid to protect. Whatever.
This is written.
I'm sorry about all the swearing, people. It's very fired up.
There's good. I love hitting that button, as you know, and I know our malcontents love the clip there from Metapocalypse. There's so much. It's one of these things. It's like the George Floyd story, right? The other thing, Jennifer, I want to close with is they played the excited delirium card here. And
nope.
According to the American Medical Association, doctors in the AMA, like if you had the book, There's nothing in the book of excited delirium as a cause of death or a disease or a medical diagnosis. The American Psychological Association, the DSM-5, excited delirium isn't in there. It is not a psychological. And Jennifer, you know, because you're a historian, 100 years ago, women were put in mental institutions because they were suffering from hysterics. And hysterics. It was hysterics.
It was hysteria, yes. We could be put into mental institution for being hysteria. We could be sterilized. There were all sorts of things that were done for women being hysterical. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting now that police are judge, jury, executioner, and doctors.
So there is no such thing as excited delirium, and a doctor will tell you that. And before somebody puts the National Institute Health white paper on the study that they did on excited delirium, a study by a university does not mean that this is something that exists. You're not going to go into a hospital and they're not going to go, they are suffering from excited delirium as a diagnosis. It's just, it doesn't even exist. And they tried to play that card with Manny Ellis. Well, it was just as they did with George Floyd. And, you know, one of my messages to the City of Tacoma Police Union, based on well, this will come out in the trial and it's a witch hunt and blah, blah, blah. If the state puts the same amount of resources into the witnesses and building their case and getting people to stand up on a stand and going, yeah, a large heart, but you know, the people that were dogpiled on top of Manny Ellis and the fact that he was hobbled and laying on his stomach and had a spit mask on his head, that killed him. The methamphetamine in his system, yes, maybe enough to kill you or me, but not enough to kill a drug addict. And, you know, also, if somebody was dying from a drug overdose from methamphetamine, they don't fight 5 police officers for their life. They black out.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he black out? Because I can't breathe, sir. We will follow this story. We will follow this story. And this is going to drag out for a long time because, you know, Jeff Nelson and Jennifer, I doubt beyond an arraignment, there probably will be no movement on these cases while these officers still draw paychecks. There will be no movement on these cases until the courts physically open for COVID, because that's what a lot of lawyers are doing right now for serious crimes.
Well, you know what I have to say to those officers?
Well, the law technically says we have to do this in person, technically. So, and my client wants to do it in person, doesn't want to do it in a Zoom meeting. So we have to hold this hearing off.
Wow.
All right, we could just
I'm just going to let it go.
Keep going on this and belaboring it. I think Lori's Jenkins interview, right? I mean, we ended up like rat holing on this because it ties back to, you know, the Jenkins interview. Some of the things that ended up on the cutting room floor, she talked a lot about carbon credits in the interview. There was a discussion about childcare and the criticality of childcare in helping people to get to work and money that's being allocated in that space to help people for childcare. There will be a story in the Seattle Gay News that will go in much deeper. And Renee, you have the transcript now. Love you, Renee. And your secret is safe with us.
Yeah.
For now. Malcontents, I guess the last thing I want to say here, we only said spam those hearts once. Yeah, the batteries are definitely going out on this. I had to hit the button like 5 times. Oh yeah, the little battery warning light is just starting to glow, just the tiniest little bit there. Malcontents, please consider becoming a patron for the channel here, or throwing a little Venmo in the tip jar. We can't do this for free. I know a question that was asked yesterday is like, how long did you work on that documentary? There were 230 hours of video that was shot. Now, that doesn't mean 230 hours of work, because as people know, in the field, sometimes they may be shooting 2, 3, up to 4 cameras at the same time. So there isn't exactly 230 hours in field time, but there was 230 hours of watching video to find the pieces and then glue that together into a story. Then there was hours of research to find news clips and then edit that in a way where we didn't step on fair use and copyright laws. There were reaching out to a couple of people to get permission to use their content. And then there was maybe 100 hours of post-production to get the audio all synced up and all. So, I mean, it's 6 months of full-time work is what's in there right now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen for free. Well, it did happen kind of for free, but it can't keep happening for free. So you can become a patron for $2 a month. That's it, $2 a month. And you're like, what does $2 a month do? You know what? 20, 30 people do $2 a month. It starts to add up. That's my appeal. Jennifer, no show on Monday. Enjoy your Memorial Day.
I will see you Monday evening, though.
You will see me on Monday because we will be in Auburn and we will be streaming from there for the Jesse Saray Candlelight Vigil. It is up on our Facebook page. We will continue to push this. We will put this on our Twitter page. If you are looking for something to do that is non-performative on your Memorial Day weekend, and if you have been vaxxed and you have a mask, you really don't have any excuses. It is 1 hour of your life to come down to Auburn and hold the Saray family, literally and metaphorically, in your hands and show your support at the 2-year anniversary of the death of Jesse Saray, who was also in a mental health crisis and who was executed by Officer Jeff Nelson, still collecting a paycheck, by the way, from the Auburn Police Department and delaying his trial. Hell of a system we have.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God, somebody, M-Player rocked. There was an old school gamer that read our channel description on Twitch. Dope ass name. M-Player did rock back in the day. And I am OG gamer. Like if you were an M-Player, that's pretty friggin' OG. So Jennifer, other thing, not next Monday, not this, yeah, our next Monday show, meaning not next Monday, but the next time we're on the air on a Monday.
Yep.
It's in here. No Zoom connections, no. All right. Good night, Malcontents.
Night.
Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Antifa, fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.